Hello, this is Sandy Gallagher with Session 4 of The Science of Getting Rich, the first principle in the science of getting rich. How do you think? Not what do you think, but how. That may not be a question you've explored very much. Work, school, society put a lot of emphasis on the quantity and content of our thoughts, but the quality of them, that does not get a lot of attention. And as a result, most people are thinking in a way that puts them on the path away from true ongoing abundance. Examining the way you currently think and changing it is the first and most important step in the science of getting rich. In many ways, it's also the most difficult because it requires you to do something differently than the way you've done it your entire life. Sometimes it even requires you to go against what your own eyes are telling you. But if you master this new way of thinking, you will possess one of the most powerful tools imaginable, a tool that will give you more control over your life than you ever thought possible. So what is this different way of thinking? Let's join Bob Proctor and discover the answer.
You know, as you go through this session, you're going to find that we have literally been programmed to live from the outside in. And this lesson is going to grab your head and turn it right around, and you're going to live from the inside out. Waddell said, "Thought is the only power that can produce tangible riches from the formless substance. The stuff from which all things are made is a substance which thinks. A thought of form in this substance produces the form. Original substance moves according to its thoughts. Every form and process you see in nature is the visible expression of a thought in the original substance. As it thinks of a form, it takes that form. As it thinks of a motion, it makes that motion. That is the way all things were created. We live in a thought world, and this world is a part of a thought universe. The original thought of a moving universe first extended throughout the formless substance. The thinking stuff resulting from that thought took the form of systems of planets and continues to maintain that form. Thinking substance takes the form of its thought and moves according to the thought, holding the idea of a circling system of suns and worlds. It took the form of these bodies and moved them accordingly. Although centuries may be required to do the work, by thinking the form of a slow-growing tree, the formless substance produces the tree. In creating, the formless substance seems to move according to the lines of motion it has established. The thought of an oak tree does not cause the instant formation of a full-grown tree, but it does start in motion the forces which will produce the tree along established lines. What we're dealing with when it comes to our world, that's yours and mine, our own personal world, is thinking. We've got to think. And we're finding that the results we're getting are limited to the thoughts that we're thinking. Now, the only thing that's held you and me back is the awareness of what we're capable of doing. I had a wonderful mentor, Leland Valvandewaal. He used to say, observation is power. Judgment is weakness. We never want to judge another person or another situation. Let's just observe the way it is. And you know, by working with our consciousness, we can become more and more aware. Like the way to fly airplanes has always been here. The thoughts, or the thought stuff that created the thoughts that built the idea that eventually introduced us to New Kingdom, it was always here. The thought stuff that created the thought that built the idea to build the internet and have email and have all the beautiful conveniences that are very commonly accepted today was always here. We had to develop the awareness for doing that. Waddell's pointed out to look upon the appearance of poverty will produce corresponding forms in your own mind. Instead, you must hold to the truth there is no poverty, there is only abundance. As we get involved in the first principle, what we're really getting involved in is awareness. We want to become aware that everything originates in our own mind first and then materializes in our outside world. My old mentor, Val Vanderwall, and I worked with these 7 levels of awareness that I'm going to touch on now. You will find them outlined in the text of this particular program. These levels are animal, mass, aspiration, individual, discipline, experience, and mastery. Now, we start out with our animalistic consciousness. We end up with mastery. How do we move from this animalistic state to mastery? Well, first of all, let's take a look at what happens when we're operating on an animalistic state. What does the animal do? The animal reacts. It's fight or flight. What do a lot of people do? A lot of people react. They see something and they react to it. What does the person do that's mastered their life? They respond to it. See, there's a big difference. React or respond. Now, the reaction, it's fight or flight. On responding, it's stop and think. Think and act. There's an enormous difference. Well, when we move away from this animalistic way of life, what do? Well, we fall into another level that we call mass consciousness, and we just go with the crowd. All you have to do is go into any high-rise building in any city in the world today around lunch hour and watch people come pouring out of offices. You could get trampled if you didn't get out of the way. Why do they do it? Well, it's noon. Everybody goes to eat at noon. You'd say, well, are they hungry? No, but it doesn't matter. They eat. It's noon. The masses live by a clock. They don't live by their thoughts. They're controlled by habit. They're controlled by other people. You'll hear people say, well, they can't all be wrong. I like the way Earl Nightingale used to put it. He said, if you see a large mass of people moving in one direction and 1 or 2 going in the other direction, and you're not going to be thinking, he said, if you're just going to follow other people, follow the 1 or 2, and you'll probably never make another mistake as long as you live. The masses historically have always gone in the wrong direction. You just join in and away you go. I remember when I was a young guy, there was a group of fellas that I was hanging around with. They said, we're joining the Navy. Are you coming, Bob? And I said, sure. I'd never given any thought to a boat, let alone a ship. Why did I do that? Well, the other kids were doing it. Why did I do that? Well, as a little kid, you're told, go on outside, be like the rest of the kids. The only thing you couldn't be like. You're a unique individual. But we move into this mass consciousness, and we just move along like herded animals. How do we break out of the mass? Well, I can tell you how I broke out of the mass. I started to read. I started to read books that triggered ideas in my mind of a better way of life. And what happened was I aspired to something better than what I had. You see, we've gone from the animal to the mass to aspiration. And you aspire to be more, to have more, to do more than you've already got. How do we break away from this mass consciousness, from just following the crowd? You move into the 3rd level of awareness, and it's called aspiration. And that's when you become aware that something in you wants you to live a fuller life, wants you to live a richer life, wants you to be more than you are, to do more and to have more. And when that aspiration becomes strong enough, we want to break away. But as we go to break away and move into the 4th level, and that is individual consciousness, that's where we want to express our uniqueness as a human being. I'm going to tell you this. The paradigms, the conditioning is trying to pull us back to the mass. We're worried about what they think. We're concerned with what the other people, what would the neighbors think? And we were programmed to do that as a child. So although the idea is there, we aspire to be more than we are, the mass consciousness is trying to pull us back. How do we step into that 4th level and begin to express our uniqueness as a human being? Well, it's coupled with the 5th level, discipline. And discipline is where you give yourself a command and follow it. This is how you break away from the masses. This is how you begin to express your own uniqueness as a human being. This is when you take the aspiration to move ahead and express your uniqueness and do it. You give yourself a command and follow it. Now, when you do that, the sixth level is ready-made for you. You gain the experience, and that's what learning is all about. Learning is when you consciously entertain an idea, you get emotionally involved in the idea, and you act on the idea, and you change the end result. And it's the change in result, the experience of the change in result that came about because you disciplined yourself. You gave yourself a command and follow it. You followed the aspiration to express your uniqueness. That's what the learning is. And it's when you do that, when you step into that sixth area and you keep experiencing greater things, that you move on to the seventh, and then you begin to master what you're doing. And what do we talk about mastering what we're doing? We stop letting the physical world control us, and we begin to control ourselves. We begin to think, and we let our thoughts guide our world. There's a graphic illustration in your workbook that shows you what happens. The winning way is your starting point in any aspect of life should be thought. But that's not where most people start. Most people start with results. They let their present results lodge in their mind, and those present results then takes them to the next stage, which is thought. The present results are what trigger the thoughts. Those thoughts then produce feelings. Feelings produce action, which produce more of the same results. This is a self-fulfilling cycle of doom. The average individual's mind is busily engaged in a hodgepodge of totally unrelated ideas, the like of which you'd have difficulty finding outside of a common encyclopedia. Their mind is being dazzled through their senses. Order, vision, and focus are near impossible because of the mental state they permit themselves to be in during their waking hours. This is the mass thinking. They don't think. It's mental activity, and they've tricked themselves into believing that mental activity is thinking. These people believe themselves to be a physical thing in a world of things. They're clutched by an unseen enemy. The lack and limitation being expressed in their present results have captured their conscious control. They concentrate all their mental energy on the limited supply, thereby creating more of the same. The only thing that can grow, Emerson said, is the thing you give energy to. Now, if you let the starting point in your life be your present results, I can assure you, as certain as it's going to get dark tonight, that you're going to get more of the same results. If you let your present results fill your consciousness, that's going to dictate the thoughts that you think. Those thoughts are going to set up the vibration that we call feeling. Those feelings are going to move you into action, and the action's going to produce more of the same result. Now, how do we break away from this? Well, that, in fact, my friend, is the first principle. And that's what this lesson is all about. You see, an aware person thinks what they want to think regardless of appearance. The starting point is thought. They've checked the results, they see what they got, and they say, that's not what I want. So then they begin to think, and they build the thoughts of the things they want. That causes the feeling. The feeling produces the action produces the result. They then observe the result, and they make whatever adjustments are necessary in their thinking to improve it again. We have to be very calm of mind if we're going to do this properly. We cannot let the outside world control us. You just cannot do it. We say, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Well, there's only one thing to be set free from, and that is ignorance. To think what you want to think is to think truth regardless of appearance. James Allen put it very well. He said, calmness of mind is one of the beautiful jewels of wisdom. It is the result of long and patient effort in self-control. Its presence is an indication of ripened experience and of a more than ordinary knowledge of the laws and operations of thought. You become calm in the measure that you understand yourself as a thought-evolved being, for such knowledge necessitates the understanding of others as the result of thought. And as you develop a right understanding and see more and more clearly the internal relations of things by the actions of cause and effect, you cease to fuss and fume and worry and grieve, and remain poised, steadfast, and serene. Now, the focus of this entire program is awareness. An ignorant person permits the appearance of things to control his or her thoughts. What we want to do is understand that we want to originate thoughts. We don't want to let what's going on outside control our thoughts. Every thought of form held in thinking substance causes the creation of that form, but always, or at least generally, along lines of growth and action already established. If the thought of a house of a certain construction were impressed upon the formless substance, it might not cause the instant formation of that house, but it would cause the turning of creative energies already working in trade and commerce into such channels as to result in the speedily building of the house. And if there were no existing channels through which the creative energy could work, the house would be formed directly from the primal substance, without waiting for the slow processes of the organic and inorganic world. No thought of form can be impressed upon the original substance without causing the creation of that form. You and I are creative beings. We were created in God's image. We were given creative faculties. Now, the fact that most people never understand that, never develop that, is another thing. We're not most people. We are studying. We're beginning to understand this. We start to see that we have higher faculties. A human being is a thinking center and can originate thought. All the forms that a person fashions with his or her hands must first emerge from thought. An individual cannot shape a thing until that same individual has thought that thing. And so far, the human race has confined its efforts wholly to the work of its hands. It has applied manual labor to the world of forms, seeking to change or modify already existing forms. Our human race has never thought of trying to cause the creation of new forms by impressing thought upon the formless substance. When individuals have a thought form, they take the material from the forms of nature and make an image of that form which is in the mind. They have so far made little or no effort to cooperate with the formless intelligence to work with the Father. They have not dreamed that they can do what they seeth the Father doing. Mankind reshapes and modifies existing forms by manual labor. We have not considered the question of whether we could produce things from the formless substance by communicating our thought to it. I propose that we may do so. To prove that any man or woman may do so and show how, my first step will be to lay down 3 fundamental propositions. First, we assert there is one original formless substance from which all things are made. All the seemingly many elements are only different presentations of one element. What does he mean by that? Well, let's look at it this way. I want you to imagine yourself holding a glass of water. What is your hand made of? Your hand is made of energy. It's a mass of molecules and a high speed of vibration. What's the glass made of? Made of energy. What's in the glass? Water. What's the water made of? Energy. Now, you take and boil that water, and it's not called water anymore. It'll be called steam. It's the same energy, just moving at a different speed. What's the glass made from? Energy. It used to be sand. So what we've really done is alter the molecular structure of the energy, and we turn the sand into glass. Still the same formless stuff. Well, you see, where we have a problem is that thought and energy is one. Thought waves are cosmic waves that penetrate all time and space. First, he said, we assert there is one original formless substance, and from which all things are made. Well, where does everything start? It starts in thought. What's thought? Thought's energy. Think of it. Thought waves are cosmic waves that penetrate all time and space. Do you know that thought would make the laser beam look puny? All the seemingly many elements are only different presentations of one element. All the many forms found in organic and inorganic nature are only different shapes made from the same stuff. And this stuff is thinking stuff. A thought held in it produces the form of the thought. Thought in thinking substance produces shapes. A human being is a thinking center, capable of original thought. Do you know that the one point all great leaders have agreed on, they've disagreed on virtually everything else, is that you and I become what we think about? That was the foundation of Earl Nightingale's strangest secret record. First recording that outside of the entertainment industry that sold over 1 million copies. And if you haven't listened to it, I'd suggest you go to the Nightingale Conant Corporation and buy it. It's incredible. 40 minutes of the best philosophy you're ever going to hear. And they're saying the same thing here. Thought in substance produces shapes. A human being is a thinking center, capable of original thought. That means you are a thinking center. You're the center of thought. Thought's omnipresent. Thought energy's everywhere. And this energy flows into your consciousness and you can think anything you want to think. Isn't that nice? And thought is the preamble to everything. Do you want to live a richer life? Start to think of a richer life. Do you want to live in a healthier body? Start thinking of a healthier body. Do you want to have more meaningful relationships? Start thinking of more meaningful relationships. If any one of us can communicate our thought to original substance, we can cause the creation or formation of the thing we think about. That's a huge idea. That's essentially what I did half a century ago. Here I was broke, I was unhappy, I was sick. And I met a man that provoked me to look at that, look at the results I was getting, and he got me to admit I don't like these results. He said, quit thinking about those results. Start to think of what you want. Now let me just share part of the syllabus of this with you from Waddles. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces a thing that is imaged by the thought. You can form things in your thought, and by impressing your thought upon formless substance, can cause the thing you think about to be created. I love that. I just absolutely love it. I can prove these statements by both logic and experience. Reasoning back from the phenomena of form and thought, I come to one original thinking substance. And reasoning forward from this thinking substance, I come to the individual's power to cause the formation of the thing one thinks about. Don't just treat this as something you're listening to. Really think about what you're hearing. It's how everything happens. Where do you think the garments that you have on your back right now came from? Somebody thought them. We call them designers. And then we made them. Where do you think your automobile came from? Someone thought about it. Henry Ford built the first V8 engine. He called his engineers in and told them to build it. They went away and come back and said it can't be done. Now, he was the guy that was signing the check. He said, go away and do it. They come back about 6 months later and said it can't be done. He said, go away and do it. Henry Ford had an innate awareness. If he could see it in his mind, he could do it. He understood the secret. That's what the secret is. If you can build the image in your mind and hold it, you will attract all that's required for the manifestation of it. Now, by experiment, I find this reasoning to be true, and this is my strongest proof. If one person using this program gets rich by doing what you're hearing, that is evidence in support of my claim. Well, I've done that. I've done exactly what Wallace Waddles said, and I'm earning millions of dollars. Here's a guy, no formal education, no business experience, but he's earning millions of dollars. How? Doing what I'm sharing with you here. Furthermore, if every person who does what I say to do gets rich, that is positive proof until someone goes through the process and fails. The theory is true until the process fails. And this process will not fail because every person who does exactly what I say to do will get rich. I have said that an individual gets rich by doing things in a certain way. In order to do so, you must become able to think in a certain way. Your way of doing things is the direct result of the way you think about things. To do things in a way you want to do them, you will have to acquire the ability to think the way you want to think. This is the first step toward getting rich. To think what you want to think is to think truth regardless of appearances. You could very easily skip over that. I don't want you to. I want you to really mentally play with what I've just said. To do things in a way you want to do them, you will have to acquire the ability to think the way you want to think. In other words, if you want to live an opulent lifestyle, you're going to have to think that way. If you want to earn many times what you're earning without working hard, you're going to have to think that way. And you see, this is the first step toward getting rich. To think what you want to think is to think truth regardless of appearances. What Waddles is really saying is quit letting your physical world control your higher world. If you are working with electricity, you always work from a higher to a lower potential. You never work the other way. Why is it in life we work from a lower to a higher potential? Well, if you think about it for a while, it'll become obvious. We've been programmed to do that. As little kids, the parent will say, will you listen to what I'm telling you? Will you look at this? Always the attention is brought to bear on the outside world, never on the inside world. If we would quietly move towards the little person and say, what do you see in your mind? What are you looking at? And encourage them to talk to you about the pictures that are going on in their mind, they would live in a much different world. Now let's go back to Wallace Wattles' words. He said, you have the natural and inherent power to think what you want to think, but it requires far more effort to do so than it does to think the thoughts which are suggested by appearances. To think according to appearances is easy. To think truth regardless of appearances is laborious and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work you have to perform. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose you're in sales, and your previous month's sales were all fairly low. Are you going to let your previous results control your thinking about what's going to happen this month? Or are you going to originate new thoughts? Let's take a look at the bank account. The bank account is very low. Do you let the bank account dictate your state of wealth, or are you going to think your own thoughts? Waddles went on to say there is no labor from which most people shrink as they do from that of sustained and consecutive thought. It is the hardest work in the world. Do you know, Earl Nightingale was an absolutely brilliant man. He was my boss, my mentor. I worked with Earl for 5 years. He used to say if most people said what they were thinking, they would be speechless. And you know, people would laugh at that. They'd say, well, everybody thinks. Everybody does not think. Most people do not think. Mental activity does not constitute thinking. Dr. Ken McFarland said 2% of the people think, 3% think they think, and he said 95% would rather die than think. Thinking is the hardest work there is, which is the probable reason so few people engage in it. Now permit me to repeat what Waddle said. He said there is no labor from which most people shrink as they do from that of sustained and consecutive thought. It is the hardest work in the world. This is especially true when truth is contrary to appearances. Every appearance in the visible world tends to produce a corresponding form in the mind which observes it. This can only be prevented by holding the thought of the truth. If your bank account is very low, let's say there's only $1,000 in it, and it's the 15th of the month, and by the end of the month you have to have $15,000. Are you going to let the $1,000 dictate the image you're holding of your bank account in your mind? Or are you going to hold the thought of the truth, the $15,000? You've got to determine who's in control. Is the bank account in control of your thinking, or is your thinking in charge of your bank account? Now, Waddle said to look upon the appearance of disease will produce the form of disease in your own mind and ultimately in your body. Instead, you must hold the thought of the truth, which is there is no disease. Disease is only an appearance. The reality is health. To look upon the appearances of poverty will produce corresponding forms in your own mind. Instead, you must hold to the truth that there is no poverty. There is only abundance. It requires power to think health when surrounded by the appearance of disease, or to think riches when in the midst of the appearances of poverty. But when you acquire this power, you become a mastermind. You can conquer fate, and you can have what you want. You might want to mentally go back to those 7 levels of awareness. Now, this power can only be acquired by getting hold of the basic fact which is behind all appearances, that there is one thinking substance from which and by which all things are made. Then we must grasp the truth that every thought held in this substance becomes a form, and that a person can impress thoughts upon it so as to cause them to take form and become visible things. When we realize this, we lose all doubt and fear because we know that we can create what we want to create. We can get what we want to have and can become what we want to be. As a first step toward getting rich, we must believe the 3 fundamental statements given previously in this particular lesson. In order to emphasize them, I want to repeat them here. Now, this is part of Waddell's syllabus. He said there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces the thing that is imaged by the thought. You can form things in your thought, and by impressing thought upon formless substance, you can cause the thing you think about to be created. I absolutely love the syllabus. I really do. I'm going to repeat it. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces the thing that is imaged by the thought. You can form things in your thought, and by impressing thought upon formless substance, you can cause the thing you think about to be created. You can visualize a relationship in your mind that you don't now have. You can build the thoughts. I guarantee you that relationship will walk right into your life. You can see abundance. You can see wealth in your mind, and I guarantee you it will walk right into your life. Everything you want, you can visualize your company being the way you want it to be. Give those thoughts to the universe, it will move into form. Waddell said you must lay aside all other concepts of the universe than this monistic one. You must dwell upon this until it is fixed in your mind and has become your habitual thought. Read these creed statements over and over again. Fix every word upon your memory and meditate upon them until you firmly believe what they say. If a doubt comes to you, cast it aside as a sin. Do not listen to arguments against this idea. Do not go to churches or lectures where a contrary concept of things is taught or preached. Do not read magazines or books which teach a different idea. If you get mixed up in your faith, all of your efforts will be in vain. Do not ask why these things are true, nor speculate on how they can be true. Simply take them on trust. The science of getting rich begins with the absolute acceptance of this faith. Do you know the truth is that all religions teach this? Every religion teach you that you are created in God's image, you've been given creative faculties, and you're capable of doing great work. Now allow me to share the questions with you that come with this segment of the program. Here's the first one. What is the first step toward getting rich? That's an interesting question, isn't it? What is the first step toward getting rich? Here's the second one. What is mankind and what power have we? Now that could keep you thinking for 20 years. Now here's the third. It's a question and a comment, really, or a suggestion. I want you to repeat the summary that I read to you of Wattles that I said I was so familiar with. I'll read it one more time. He said, there is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces a thing that is imaged by the thought. You can form things in your thought, and by impressing thought upon formless substance, you can cause the thing you think about to be created. Memorize that, repeat it often. Now let me ask you, do you understand it? Do you believe it? How can it be proved? They're interesting questions. Do you understand it? Do you believe it? How can it be proved? Now here's another one. What is the basic fact behind all appearances? These questions are quite important. You might want to discuss them with a business associate or a loved one. Here's the fifth question. What must you do and what must you believe if you are to practice the science of getting rich? I love that. I'm going to repeat it for you. What must you do and what must you believe if you are to practice the science of getting rich? And number 6, what requires the expenditure of more power than any other work a person has to perform? And here's the last, why? Go back and study the 7 levels of awareness. Really pay attention to them and understand this. Everything you will ever want is already here. You simply must become aware of its presence. And as you do, you're going to attract it into your life. Remember, you do not get rich by doing certain things. You get rich by doing things in a certain way. And the starting point of everything in your life must be thought. Not results, but thought. That's the starting point. To bring this lesson to a close, let's think about it. The first principle in the science of getting rich. Getting rich is the result of doing things in a certain way. Wattles' syllabus is a beauty. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which, in its original state, permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. A thought in this substance produces a thing that is imaged by the thought. You can form things in your thought, and by impressing your thought upon formless substance, you can cause the thing you think about to be created. I want to suggest at this point in the science of getting rich that you sit down and ask yourself, how do you feel about this syllabus? How do you feel about what Mr. Wattles is sharing with us? I'm going to ask you to write that out. Make a written declaration about how you feel about this so far. And then look forward to the rest of the program. This is Bob Proctor, and thank you.
In this session, Bob Proctor revealed to you the first principle in the science of getting rich. Wallace Wattles said that when we fully grasp this principle, when we internalize each step of it at a deep level, and truly begin to incorporate these steps in our thoughts and actions, we lose all doubt and fear. We lose all doubt and fear. Can you imagine how different your life will be once you're freed of those burdens? This chapter in the science of getting rich always calls to mind for me that old expression, I'll believe it when I see it. You see, we're conditioned from an early age to subscribe to this philosophy. That is, believing that what we see right in front of us is the real truth, that anything else is a lie or a trick or a false hope. But this session demonstrates just how wrong and dangerous that line of thinking is. Whatever it is that you want, you will see it made manifest in your life when you first see it in your mind's eye and believe that what you're seeing is true. More true, in fact, than what you can see in front of you at that moment. In other words, you'll receive it when you first see it and believe it. Now, this can be kind of hard to grasp. We're used to operating in accordance with that old expression, believing, really believing, that what we see in front of us is an accurate representation of who we are. the grade on our report card, the dollar amount on our paycheck, the body shape in the mirror. If this is the way you've always gone through life, it may feel easier to keep going this way, especially in the beginning, but it is not the path to take if you want to get rich. As Wallace Wattles says, to think truth, regardless of appearance, is laborious and requires the expenditure of more power than any other work a person has to perform. But you can do it. Your thinking is what controls and causes your results, nothing else. That means if you want different results than what you currently have, you must be completely focused on and thinking about those different results and not your current ones. Otherwise, the results you're getting now are what you'll keep getting. The way to do this is to build a very clear image of the life you want. Then hold that image in your mind and focus on it as frequently and intensely as you can. Write it down to imprint it on your thoughts even more deeply. Do this at least once each day for 1 month and notice the changes that arise in your life as a result. This is Sandy Gallagher, reminding you that the science of getting rich is working for you.